towards the continuation of our mission to truthfully go where no news will have been going before. Kosovo, Serbia agreed to implement EU brokered deal, EU official. Kuwait News Agency, Brussels, March 19th. European Union High Representative Joseph Borrell announced late Saturday that the leaders of Serbia and Kosovo have agreed on how to implement an EU-mediated deal to normalize their relations. The EU welcomes the parties agreeing today on the implementation of the agreement on the path to normalization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia, which is foreseen to become integral and binding part of the respective European paths of the parties, Borrell said in a press statement. The EU foreign policy chief noted that the two sides decided not to sign the deal, although they agreed to start implementing it. Therefore, he said, the annex and the agreement are considered adopted. The agreement came after 12 hours of talk between Kosovar Prime Minister Albin Kurti and Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić and Borrell in Ohrid, North Macedonia. The EU considers the parties agreeing today on the implementation annex of the agreement, including agreeing on full implementation of obligations from past dialogue agreements, as a significant achievement, said the EU statement. The 11-point agreement calls on both sides to maintain good neighborly relations, recognize each other's documents such as passports and their car license plates. Kosovo and Serbia agree not to block implementation of any of the articles, says the agreement. The EU-led Belgrade-Pristina dialogue was launched in 2011 to resolve disputes in the framework of a legally binding agreement. Kosovo declared independence in 2008, but Serbia refuses to recognize it and considers Kosovo to be a part of its territory. However, Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić told reporters at the meeting after the meeting that nothing's over today. It's just the beginning. On his part, Albanian Prime Minister Kurti told reporters, this is a de facto recognition between Kosovo and Serbia. And you know, Kosovo's main issue has been that Serbia does not recognize it, but in agreeing to this plan, I mean, that could be an indirect recognition. Kosovo and Serbia, this is from Al Jazeera. The title is Kosovo, Serbia agree on steps to implement EU normalization. Kosovo and Serbia have tentatively agreed on how to implement a European Union-sponsored plan to normalize their ties, according to the bloc's top diplomat, though leaders of the two nations said disagreements remain. The deal on this Saturday, yesterday, came after 12-hour talks between Kosovo Prime Minister Kurti, Serbian Prime Minister Vučić, and EU officials on implementing the normalization plan, which both sides agreed to in Brussels last month. The two leaders held separate meetings with EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell before a three-way session in the North Macedonian town of Ohrid. "We've a deal," Borrell tweeted after the meeting. Kosovo and Serbia have agreed on the implementation annex of the agreement on the path to normalization of relations, he said. This means practical steps on what has to be done, when, by who, and how, he added at a news conference. Kosovo and Serbia have been in EU-backed talks for nearly 10 years since Kosovo declared independence in 2008, almost a decade after war-ended Serbian rule. But Serbia still regards Kosovo as a breakaway province, and flare-ups between the Balkan neighbors have stoked fears of a return to conflict. Both countries hope to join the EU one day, and they've been told they must first mend their relations. Solving the dispute between Serbia and Kosovo has become more important as war rages in Ukraine and fear mounts in the West that Russia could try to stir instability in the volatile Balkans, where it holds historic influence. The EU plan calls for the two countries to maintain good neighborly relations and recognize each other's official documents and national symbols, but the plan, drafted by France and Germany and supported by the United States, does not explicitly call for mutual recognition between Kosovo and Serbia. If implemented, it would prevent Belgrade from blocking Kosovo's attempts to seek membership in the UN and other international organizations. Although tentatively agreeing on the EU plan reached last month, Serbia's populist President Vucic seemed to backtrack on some of its points after pressure from far-right groups which considered Kosovo the cradle of the Serbian state and Orthodox religion. Vucic said on Thursday that he won't sign anything at the Ohrid meeting and earlier pledged never to recognize Kosovo or allow its UN membership. He repeated Saturday that he has not signed the implementation document, although Kurdi insisted on it. So, that's what this show is about. It's the aggregation of the different types of her perspective journalistically. And I'm seeing that the journalism is aligned with the West, propagate this concept of Serbia being against Kosovo's sovereignty in a sense. And in other medias, it's not even that those other medias are fighting back against it. They don't recognize it. So that means that Serbia's concepts on Kosovo's sovereignty are being perpetuated and probably overly recognized by Western media. Let's be frank. He said the parties have not agreed on all points, but despite differences, we've had decent conversation. He added, in the months ahead, we're facing serious and difficult tasks. On the other hand, Kurdi complained that Vucic did not sign the implementation deal on Saturday. This is de facto recognition between Kosovo and Serbia, since Serbia has not yet signed the agreement, he said. Now it's up to the EU to make it internationally binding. Borrell said the EU will now forcefully demand both sides to fulfill obligations if they want to join the bloc, warning there would be consequences otherwise. He also touched upon a proposed association of Serb municipalities in Kosovo, which would give greater autonomy to Serb majority municipalities, a long disputed topic. Kosovo has agreed to launch immediately, and when I'm saying immediately, I mean immediately, negotiations with the EU facilitated dialogue on establishing a specific arrangement and guarantees to ensure an appropriated level of self-management for the Serbian communities in Kosovo. Kosovo is a majority ethnic Albanian former province of Serbia. The 98-99 war erupted when separatist ethnic Albanians rebelled against Serbia's rule, and Belgrade responded with a brutal crackdown. So that's the crux of the issue is that it was a part of Serbia, but it was populated by mostly Albanians. So there was a separatist movement within what is now Kosovo. So about 13,000 people died, mostly ethnic Albanians. In 1999, a NATO military intervention forced Serbia to pull out of the territory. Kosovo declared independence in 2008. Tensions have simmered ever since Kosovo's independence is recognized by many Western countries, but it's opposed by Belgrade with the backing of Russia and China. EU brokered talks have made little headway in recent years. Serbia has maintained close ties to its traditional Slavic ally Russia, despite the war in Ukraine, partly because of Moscow's opposition to Kosovo's independence and possible veto on its UN membership at the UN Security Council. Serbia and Kosovo agreed to implement EU-backed deal normalizing ties. Kosovo and Serbia have agreed to a deal to normalize ties, Joseph Borrell, the European Union's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, said on Saturday after meeting Serbian President Aleksandar Vucic and Kosovo's head of government, Albin Kurti, in the North Macedonian town of Ohrid. We have a deal. Kosovo and Serbia have agreed on the implementation annex of the agreement on the path to normalization of relations. The parties have fully committed to honor all articles of the agreement and to implement their respective obligations expediently and in good faith, Borrell tweeted. President Vucic told a news conference the parties have not agreed on all points. Despite differences, we had decent conversations, he said. Borrell said the EU will now forcefully demand that both sides fulfill obligations if they want to join the bloc, warning there would be consequences otherwise. Serbia and Kosovo have been in EU-backed talks for nearly 10 years since Kosovo's unilaterally declared independence from Serbia in 2008. Serbia rejects it and considers Kosovo its own province. And from aa.com.tr, Serbia Kosovo agree on implementation of EU-backed agreement to normalize ties. The leaders of Serbia and Kosovo have agreed on how to implement an EU-backed deal to normalize ties. The bloc's foreign policy chief said on Saturday the agreement came after 12 hours of talks between Kosovar Prime Minister Kurti and Serbian President Vučić and EU officials in Ohrid, North Macedonia. Kosovo and Serbia have agreed on the implementation of the annex of the agreement on the path to normalization of relations. The parties have fully committed to honoring all articles of the agreement and implementing their respective obligations expediently and in good faith, Joseph Borrell told reporters. Vučić said after the meeting that some sort of agreement was reached. Certainly, this will not be all. These few points that we've agreed on will become part of the negotiation framework for both sides. But Kurti said Vučić did not sign the implementation deal on Saturday. Now it's up to the European Union to find a mechanism to make this agreement legally and internationally binding, he added. That's a very good point. Kurti's very intelligent. Launched in 2011, the EU-led Belgrade-Pristina dialogue aims to find a mutually agreeable solution for disputes in the framework of a legally binding agreement. The EU requires Kosovo and Serbia to reach a final agreement and resolve disputes to progress in their integration into the bloc. Most UN member states, including the US, UK, France, Germany, Turkey, recognize Kosovo as a separate country after it declared independence from Serbia 15 years ago. Serbia, however, continues to regard it as its territory. The 11-point agreement calls on the sides to maintain good neighborly relations and recognize each other's documents such as passports and license plates. From TRT World, Serbia's Vučić rules out signing EU-facilitated agreement with Kosovo. That's actually a little older, but we could read it because in actuality, Vučić did not sign it, right? So Vučić is due to meet Kosovo Prime Minister Kurti and EU officials to discuss the implementation of the deal. Vučić has vowed not to sign an EU-facilitated agreement with Kosovo, but said he will discuss the normalization of relations. We know our red lines at all times and will always defend our country. Now more than ever, we need wisdom. We need peace, not foolishness, not irresponsibility. Kosovo declared its independence from Serbia in 2008, with most UN member states recognizing it as a separate autonomous country, but Serbia continues to regard it as a territory. And from Public's Radio, Serbia, Kosovo agree on how to implement EU plan, envoy says. EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell says the leaders of Serbia and Kosovo have tentatively agreed on how to implement a European Union-sponsored policy or a plan to normalize their relations after decades of tensions between the two Balkan wartime foes. Speaking at a news conference after nearly 12 hours of talks in the North Macedonian lakeside resort of Ohrid on Saturday, Borrell told reporters that Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić and Kosovo Prime Minister Albin Kurti have reached an agreement on how to do it. They agreed last month to the wording of an 11-point EU plan to normalize relations following the 98-99 war and Kosovo's declaration of independence from Serbia in 2008. Joseph Borrell of the EU said the objective today was to agree on how to implement the agreement accepted in the last high-level meeting. This means practical steps on what has to be done, when, by who, and how. Both countries hope to join the European Union one day, and they've been told they must first mend their relations. Solving the dispute between Serbia and Kosovo has been important as war rages in Ukraine and fears mount that Russia could try to stir instability in the Balkans, where it holds historical influence. Parties could now reach an agreement on the more detailed proposal, Borrell said. Kosovo lacked flexibility on the substance of the agreement, while Serbia previously stated principle not to sign, although they're ready to implement. Borrell said that despite the fact that a more ambitious text was proposed at the beginning of Saturday's negotiations than the one the parties have accepted, it will become an integral part of their respective European Union path. It's clear that both parties will gain a significant benefit from this agreement because the dialogue's not only because of Kosovo and Serbia, it's about the stability, the security, and the prosperity of the entire region. The agreement drafted by France and Germany and supported by the U.S. doesn't explicitly call for mutual recognition between Kosovo and Serbia. Although tentatively agreeing on the EU plan reached last month, Serbia's populist President Vučić seemed to backtrack on some of its points after pressure from far-right groups, which consider Kosovo the cradle of the Serbian state and Orthodox religion. Vučić said Thursday that he won't sign anything at the Ohrid meeting and earlier pledged never to recognize Kosovo or allow its UN membership. He repeated Saturday that he has not signed the implementation document, although Kurti insisted on it. Today wasn't any kind of D-Day, but it was a good day, Vučić said. In the months ahead, we're facing serious and difficult tasks. On the other hand, Kurti complained that Vučić did not sign the implementation deal on Saturday. Now it's up to the EU to make it internationally binding. Kosovo is a majority ethnic Albanian, former Serbian province. And we'll be back with more news. Watch this space.
It is obvious to the most simple-minded that Lokai is of an inferior breed.
The obvious visual evidence, Commissioner, is that he is of the same breed as yourself.
Are you blind, Commander Spock?
We have the evidence.
Look at me.
No one can dispute the evidence.
I thought you scientists were supposed to keep an open mind.
There's a difference between keeping an open mind and believing something because you want it to be true.
Your friend Spock is a logical man.
The whole notion
your
of
arguments
logic.
strewn with gaping defects in logic.
The whole notion of
Most
logic.
illogical reaction.
The whole notion of
Demonstrated our
logic.
superior weapons, they should have fled.
You mean they should have respected us?
Of course.
Mr. Spock, respect is a rational process. Did it ever occur to you they might react emotionally? With anger?
Doctor, I'm not responsible for their unpredictability.
You do not think like the others. There are no colors to your patterns of logic. There's only
The whole
black
notion
and
of
white.
logic.
Logical.
The
Unemotional.
whole notion of
Completely
logic.
pragmatic. And we poor irrational humans whipped them in a fair fight. Now you'll find yourself back among us illogical humans again.
Which I find eminently satisfactory.
The whole notion of logic.
Am I so desperately needed?
Because she feels. I don't. All I know is logic.
The whole
Will you
notion of
try to
logic.
understand how we feel about our life here? About each other?
Emotions are alien to me. I'm a scientist.
You're gonna leave here without them? Run off on some wild goose chase halfway across the galaxy just because you found a discrepancy in a hydrogen cloud?
Doctor, I'm chasing the captain, Lieutenant Uhura, and Ensign Chekhov, not some wild aquatic fowl.
Mr. Spock, you have a remarkably logical and
The
analytical
whole
mind.
notion of
you.
logic.
I prefer the concrete.